Hello! Okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And here is my spoiler-free review of Superman, written and directed by James Gunn, and the first installment within the DC universe, the new soft reboot of the DC Cinematic Universe. And when it comes to the character of Superman, I've always been a fan since the Richard Donner movies, but I didn't truly fall in love with the character until Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. One of my favourite superhero movies of all time. Like, it's definitely, without a doubt, in my top 10 favourite superhero movies of all time. I absolutely adore what Zack Snyder was attempting to do with the character of Superman and with the world that he was building. But, you know, without this review getting bogged down by what's gone on before, but things happened, it didn't quite work out, and then it was announced that we were gonna get a new Superman movie within a rebooted DC Cinematic Universe, and I've been really looking forward to this movie. I've been really excited, and that excitement was intensified as soon as it was announced that James Gunn was going to be writing and directing this film, as well as shepherding, you know, the new DC Cinematic Universe, the new DC on film. Like, that really just got me excited because I am a fan of James Gunn as a filmmaker, and I absolutely adored what he did with his movies within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And so, yeah, I have been, you know, really excited for this film. And yeah, surprise, surprise, you can love what Zack Snyder done as well as look forward to something new. Yeah, shocking, isn't it? So yeah, Superman. The story goes, Superman must prove to the world that he is their protector after billionaire Lex Luthor conducts a plan to turn public opinion against him. So yeah, we finally have it. We finally have James Gunn's Superman. What did I think? Well, for me personally, this movie has a lot in common with Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. It has a lot in common with what I felt Zack Snyder was attempting with this character. It explores very similar themes around, you know, belonging, identity, moral responsibility, and all of that. You know, very kind of real human themes. It's quite dark, really, with its story. But in regards to tone, in regards to how it explores those themes, it's the complete opposite to what Zack Snyder was attempting with Man of Steel. Instead, with James Gunn's Superman, they're exploring those themes without being suffocated by the intensity of those themes. And instead, it's remembering to have fun. And that's not me taking, you know, a knock, or that's not me taking a hit at Man of Steel, because like I just said, and that's why I felt like it was important that I said it, I absolutely adored what Zack Snyder was attempting. But what they do here is they take very similar themes, but they have fun. It's very joyous. It's exciting. It's like a roller coaster ride. It's a movie that just doesn't stop. It's a 2-hour film, and it felt like it was over within, you know, 1 hour and 20 minutes. This was a film that was not interested in being suffocated by those themes that are within its story, that I personally feel are important for us to really be able to somewhat connect to the character of Superman. And that I really appreciated. And it felt refreshing. It took me on a ride. Like, this was a very fun, joyous experience. And even though it has those darker elements within the story, tonally, this movie worked because it knows what it wants to be. It clearly had a very precise and clear vision by James Gunn with what he wanted to do here with this movie. And it just about works. And what I mean by just about works is, and it sort of goes into one of the minor issues that I had with this film, and that is its characters. There's an awful lot of characters in this movie that don't really get a lot of time to really breathe, for us to really sort of become acquainted with. And I do feel like that maybe there is a longer version potentially of this movie out there somewhere. I think James Gunn have said that there isn't, like, that this is the director's cut, but it definitely feels like we are missing a lot of moments with character. But at the same time, it still works. Like, everything kind of just clicks into place. It is very James Gunn in many ways. It's quite wacky, it's quite goofy, and it really leans into that. In many ways, I felt like it does a beautiful job at kind of capturing the spirit and the essence of what Richard Donner did with that very first Superman on film back in 1978. There was a lot of that kind of the comedic aspect and the goofiness of that movie year, but it also felt very James Gunn. At the same time, the movie, and I could be, this could just be me here, but if it isn't, let me know below. But it also felt very much like a Matthew Vaughn movie. Now, I know Matthew Vaughn was rumoured to be attached for years in directing a Superman film. And this film felt very much like a Matthew Vaughn movie in the way in which everything came together and in the way in which the story sort of played out and was constructed. It reminded me of movies like Kingsman and X-Men First Class, movies that I absolutely adore, by the way. It just has the look and feel of a Matthew Vaughn movie. But yeah, the movie just throws you into this world. It sort of catapults you really into its narrative. Like, it's not concerned by sort of exploring the origin story again for like the 5th time. It just wants to throw you into what is a very fantastical world and just have fun at the same time, remembering kind of that human element of its story, which sort of peeks its head in moments. In many ways, I think it's in those moments, along with that kind of the fantastical element, it kind of creates this very sharp contrast because of the way in which the narrative is constructed. It's a freight train that just doesn't stop. I mean, it's a 2-hour movie that feels like a 90-minute movie, and it's just a breeze in regard, it just has this kind of very high energy there sort of built within the narrative, and it just catapults you into it. But then you'll kind of get these moments, these kind of very small moments between two characters, or there'll be a moment of heroism where, Superman saves a certain character, but it's a moment that hits hard emotionally within that sort of very kind of small moment. And I think it works, it's effective because of that kind of contrast that's created within this movie. Another way of sort of explaining what I mean by this contrast, and that is, you've got this kind of very fantastical element to this story. Like, this is very, fantastical in its approach. James Gunn throws you into this world of gods and monsters. You've got space entities and lanterns and all of that. It's all you. But then you'll have that very kind of brief moment, wherever it be between two characters, or a moment where Superman saves a character that, is not even a main character. It might just be a citizen of Metropolis. And it's a moment that has this kind of very powerful intensity behind it, even though it's brief, but it's because of how that sharp contrast is created between the kind of the more fantastical element of its story and that kind of the very kind of grounded human themes that they are exploring. And the way in which all of that is kind of weaved together within this narrative, I felt was done very well. I can understand why some might find it a little bit jarring, or might just be lacking that kind of humanity that they sort of really wanted from this, that kind of the lack of character maybe. But for me, it's there, and it's actually, yes, they are brief moments, but even with them being brief, it's intense because of that contrast. Because 1 minute we're in this kind of fantastical, crazy, wacky moment where, you've got two characters flying through skyscrapers and all of that, and then all of a sudden we are catapulted back down to Earth with this moment, this very somber. You've got two characters talking about kind of very real human themes, very kind of real human emotions, experiencing very real human emotions. And it does, you can kind of feel the gravity drag you down within that kind of very small moment, that very brief moment. And for some people, that might not be enough. But for me, it worked, I felt, with what it was James Gunn was attempting here with this story, with a story that is engineered or designed to have this kind of very high energy behind it. When it comes to the cast, when it comes to the performances, everyone is great in this movie. And I mean everyone. Like, the casting was just fantastic. Like, David Corenswet as Superman, Clark Kent, he is incredible. Like, he looks the part, he sounds the part. I just love how he brought this character, or this different version or telling of a character to life. Like, this is a Superman that is still trying to find his place in the world. He's still trying to find his feet, you could say. And he tells that story very beautifully through his performance. Like, he brings that aspect of a character to life beautifully through the way in which he sort of holds his character, from the way in which he brings the character to life through his performance. You've also got Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, who's also great, and Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. I loved what he did with the character. Again, there were aspects to his performance that I felt like were honouring Gene Hackman's portrayal of a character. Like, there were elements of Gene Hackman within the performance, but it was also very much Nicholas Holt's version, his character. This was his character, but I definitely got vibes of Gene Hackman there. There's actually a moment with Lex Luthor in this movie that's actually quite dark and quite brutal. But you've also got moments with a character that's also quite goofy and comedic. But tonally, it still works. And again, that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier in the review, where James Gunn clearly had a precise vision with what he wanted to sort of, in how he wanted to tell this story. And I feel a lot of that is the reason to why it works, because of how he constructed this narrative in a way where you've kind of got this sharp contrast between the kind of the more fun, colourful, joyous aspect of this story. But then when you get that kind of the moment maybe of that kind of glimmer of intensity when it comes to sort of the darker elements of its story, it works because I felt like that's how the narrative was engineered. And for some people, tonally, it might be a little bit like jarring, but for me, it just clicked. It just worked. And I think it's because, again, just going back to that contrast that I kind of sensed that was sort of created, and sort of from a visual perspective, what James Gunn, I feel like, was attempting here with how he was telling this story with its themes, very kind of human themes. And that's why, for me, no matter how kind of goofy and wacky and crazy this experience got, that big beating heart that is at the core of its story is always felt. It's that kind of very strong focus on the fantastical element of bringing this world to life. You know, this is very fantastical compared to what we've had in the past. It's what makes those kind of very brief moments have the impact that they do. And it's almost like in that moment you are brought from being out in space and all of a sudden you're back on Earth. For like the briefest of moments. And for some people that might not work, and for some people that might be, you know, tonally an issue. But for me, it kind of really sort of played into the overall enjoyment and the overall thrill that I was having with this experience, if that makes sense. The score? Now, I thought John Murphy was the sole composer here to Superman, but he wasn't. You've got John Murphy, who I'm a massive fan of. Talking about Matthew Vaughn earlier on, you know, X-Men First Class, absolutely adored that soundtrack. 28 Days Later, you know, I love this composer. I love the music that he creates. But you've also got a David Fleming here composing the music along with John Murphy. And I loved it. I think you've got the right amount of John Williams there, that, you know, that classic John Williams score. And I feel like, again, the music tells a big part of where this character is at, his journey, his story, where we are at right now with this character emotionally, psychologically. And I feel like the music, I suppose in many ways it doesn't quite take off. Like, you don't get the full John Williams score, like you'll only get a portion of it. But again, for me, it's telling the story of where this character is at, and it worked. The score worked for me. I loved that we didn't get the full John Williams score. We were only getting this sort of the specific kind of build-up part of the music, this sort of certain piece of music. And for me, it worked because it kind of fitted in with what I felt like, again, James Gunn was attempting here with his story and sort of talking to us really and telling us where we're at with this character. And so I get sort of some people's criticisms with the score, the kind of the more negative criticisms, but for me, I really dug it because it really kind of fitted in and worked with what I felt like Gunn was attempting here with this particular story. Oh, and Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, Green Lantern. Like, I'm not familiar with his character from the comic books, but I love Nathan Fillion anyway. And again, you know, the old bowl cut thing, and just sort of how that kind of plays into the humour, the comedic aspects of the story, even with Clark Kent's disguise and the glasses, you know, how that's kind of referenced, the silliness really of how all of that is referenced sort of within the humour, I thought was very well done. Like, the one thing I was worried about with this movie was, will it have kind of a sense or a hint of the MCU humour, which really grates on me. But yeah, no, it's very much James Gunn in its humour. Like, it didn't make me laugh all the time. It didn't make it, you know, it didn't work every single time. But there are moments that made me chuckle. I mean, sometimes it might go a little bit too goofy, but again, it works with the overall tone and aesthetic of this movie. And with all that being said, like, I've heaped a lot of praise. There's a lot that I liked about this movie. It's very sure of itself. It knows what it wants to be. I did have a lot of issues with it as well. The writing wasn't the strongest. Yeah, there's a lot of exposition, which really surprised me, and it was very, I felt, on the nose, and it made me wonder if it was intentional or not. But there are moments that kind of made me cringe and roll my eyes because it was so evident. It was so obvious when it came to sort of the exposition. At the same time, it was like, well, it kind of works for the tone of the movie, but I was like, I kind of expected better. I expected more. But sort of overall, you know, you've got some real nice moments when it comes to the writing, especially when, you know, with characters like Lois Lane and Clark. When you got those kind of more somber moments between those two characters, the writing really shines. But then there will be moments like with Lex Luthor, for example, and it'll be like, oh, that really doesn't work. And another one of the issues being that I feel like the film really needed to slow down. It still works. At the same time, you could kind of feel it buckling, but it still clicks together. Though, I really don't think it would have hurt this film if it had slowed down just a little bit more, so we could have become a little bit more acquainted with all of these characters that they're introducing into this movie. I think the one that kind of really stood out to me was Perry White, you know, the editor-in-chief at the Daily Planet. I just felt like he was the one character that really stood out to me because it was like, oh, where the fuck did he come from? And I suppose that was sort of a sign of the movie perhaps battling a little bit because of that energy. And maybe there is another, I mean, I would say 20 minutes. I could feel like the film just needed perhaps another 15 to 20 minutes of character sort of throughout the film. And I just don't think it would have really have affected it that much. I just think it would have just allowed these characters to breathe a little bit more. And then it might have even elevated and heightened sort of those more emotional beats to its story, even though it still sort of works, you know, it still hits you in those moments. Maybe the intensity would have been greater. So I did have issues with the film, but they weren't issues that kind of really just sort of overwhelmed the experience. These were kind of minor issues only because what we did get in this 2-hour experience, it worked. Like, I was there with these characters. I was having fun in those moments where it's supposed to hit you emotionally. It did. You know, there are moments that kind of made me tear up a little bit. And it's a movie that in many ways is quite relevant. You know, it mirrors the times that we're in right now, and it does it in a way that I felt like was quite clever and quite smart. I don't think I came out to this movie quite loving it, but it came close. Like, I liked it a lot.
I like it a lot.
And I think that if you are a certain fan of Superman, who likes their Superman in a certain way, whether it be, you know, Zack Snyder's, it might either take time or you're just never going to come around to a movie like this, because this is a very different beast. And I felt like it was done in such a way that actually felt refreshing, and different, even though it was also very familiar. It was almost like a comic book come to life. I love the colours. I love the kind of the way in which the action is shot. You know, it's very dynamic in the way in which James Gunn shoots the action scenes, all in sort of one take. And I just love, you know, again, it sort of adds to the kind of the immersion of those moments. So yeah, I think that's enough rambling on from me. It will always amaze me actually how long I can ramble on for when it comes to these spoiler-free reviews. But I absolutely love doing spoiler-free reviews because I feel like I can focus a lot more on sort of the technical aspect of these movies, because I'm not really talking about sort of the plot and what what characters do and all of that. And so yeah, I highly recommend this film. I mean, and even if I hated this movie, I would have still recommended it. Do you know what I mean? Because films, I feel like, are going, like music, are going to touch people in different ways. You know, sometimes it's not all about sort of how a film is crafted. It's all about sort of how someone connects to that story on a personal level. And you could have a movie that everyone hates, but there will always be someone that absolutely adore it for a certain reason. And that's why, you know, that's one of the many magical things I feel about movies that I absolutely adore. And so yeah, that's enough rambling from me. They are my thoughts on Superman, and I will be giving Superman They are my thoughts on Superman, but what did you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews, I'm just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. And just another big thank you to everyone that's connected to the channel, whether it be liking, commenting, subscribing. It means the world to me, and it will always overwhelm me that so many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV. So yeah, that's it from me for now. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.